I always believed the greatest blessing in life was coming home to peace. For 38 years, my wife Joanne was that peace. Or so I thought. We lived in a quiet suburb just outside Charleston, South Carolina. A cul-de-sac lined with magnolia trees, where the air always smelled like fresh-cut grass and Sunday mornings hummed with lawnmowers and gospel music. I built our house myself, one brick at a time, back when my hands still had the strength to lift dreams and not just memories. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching from? Type your city, state, or even your country in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button to show some love. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another gripping story like this one. Joanne used to say I worked too hard. She'd come out to the porch with that slow southern smile of hers, a glass of lemonade in one hand, and tell me, "Raymond Cole, if you don't come in and rest, I'll call the police and tell them you're trying to build another house next to this one." I'd laugh every time, because that was Joanne. Gentle, funny, a little dramatic, but full of love. Back then, our daughter Caroline was still young. She'd run barefoot on the lawn, chasing fireflies as the sun dipped behind the oak trees. Those were the days that stitched meaning into my life. Family dinners, small-town laughter, quiet nights where everything felt right. But time changes everything. Now, when I sit on that same porch, I hear nothing but the faint creak of the rocking chair and the wind brushing through the magnolias. No laughter, no soft footsteps, just silence that stretches too long. I sometimes wonder when peace turned into habit, when love became routine. Joanne and I still shared the same house, but somewhere between the years, we'd started living like polite strangers. I blamed age, maybe even comfort. After all, marriages that last decades don't always burn. Sometimes they just fade quietly. But lately, something about that quiet didn't feel natural. It wasn't just the stillness, it was the performance. How every smile felt rehearsed, how every conversation seemed like we were both pretending not to notice the distance between us.
Have you ever looked at someone you love and felt something was missing? Tell me what you'd do if that peace you built suddenly felt like a lie. Drop your comments below. I'll be reading them. One evening, I sat out on the porch, watching the sky turn the same orange I'd painted Caroline's old bedroom. Joanne had gone upstairs earlier, saying she was tired. I remember hearing her footsteps fade across the hallway, but as I leaned back, the air shifted. There it was, her perfume, the same jasmine scent she'd worn for years, only it wasn't fading in from the porch like it usually did when she joined me. It was drifting from upstairs, from my daughter's old room. I froze. At first, I thought maybe she was cleaning. Joanne liked to tidy up before bed, but the house was too quiet. No drawers opening, no rustle of sheets, just that perfume, thick, heavy, and wrong. Something in me stirred, that old builder's instinct that knows when a foundation's about to crack. I stood up and took a few slow steps toward the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. Every part of me told myself not to overthink it, not to make stories in my head. But my gut said otherwise. Inside, the lights were dim, the TV flickering with some old movie neither of us watched anymore. I called out her name once. No answer. The air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I walked halfway up the stairs and stopped. That scent, stronger now. It was coming from the end of the hallway. Caroline's door was cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to escape. I can't tell you why I didn't open it then. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe deep down, I knew that once I saw what was behind that door, life would never be the same again. So I turned around, went back to my chair, sat down on that porch, and listened to the crickets sing over the sound of my own doubt. For the first time in 38 years, I didn't feel peace in my home. I felt like an outsider, a stranger in a place I'd built with my own hands. Before I tell you what I found that night, make sure you share this video to someone. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what a man becomes when he's pushed too far.
The days that followed that strange night were filled with small silences, the kind that echo louder than any argument. Joanne moved around the house with a softness that felt rehearsed. Her smile still appeared when I looked at her, but her eyes, they were somewhere else entirely. She used to hum when she cooked, little country tunes she'd picked up from the radio. Now the kitchen stayed quiet. Even dinner, our old ritual, felt hollow. She'd ask about my day without waiting for the answer, nodding as if following a script. I'd watch her across the table, memorizing her movements, the way her hands trembled slightly when she reached for her glass. Sometimes I'd find her on the porch late at night, whispering into her phone, her back turned to the door. When she'd notice me, she'd smile too quickly and end the call, pretending it was Caroline or one of her friends from church. At first, I convinced myself that I was imagining it, that I was just a lonely old man missing the woman I once knew. But the signs kept coming, little cracks widening between us. She'd start coming home later from errands. Groceries that should have taken 20 minutes stretched into hours. I told myself to trust her. After all, this was Joanne, the woman who stood by me through job losses, health scares, and every storm life threw at us. But the truth is, I already knew something was wrong. It happened on a Sunday. Caroline and Debian were supposed to come by for lunch, but they canceled last minute. Joanne didn't seem disappointed. She looked relieved. That afternoon, she was in the living room talking softly on her phone. When I entered, she smiled and said she was speaking with Caroline. But she forgot to turn off the call when she placed her phone on the table. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I swear I wasn't, but I heard it. A man's voice, familiar, calm, a voice I'd heard countless times at family dinners and barbecues. Debian, my daughter's husband. "Even love you too," he said softly. And then Joanne's voice, tender, almost girlish. "You too, sweetheart."
My body froze. It felt like time had stopped moving. I stared at that phone, glowing faintly on the table, and for a moment I thought my heart had stopped with it. My mind went blank. I wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe they were planning a surprise for Caroline. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. But deep down, I knew. If you heard that in your own home, would you confront them right there? Or would you wait and watch? Let me know the actions you'll take in the comments. I didn't confront her. Not that day. Instead, I watched her hang up, stretch like nothing happened, and smile at me as if she hadn't just torn 38 years of love apart with 3 careless words. I remember walking outside afterward. The magnolia trees were blooming, the air thick with that sweet southern scent. I stood there, staring at the home I'd built with my own 2 hands, realizing I didn't recognize it anymore. Every wall, every brick, every memory felt contaminated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to her steady breathing beside me. My wife, my daughter's mother, lying there as if she hadn't just confessed her betrayal to another man's voice, to my son-in-law. I thought about waking her, asking why, demanding an explanation. But anger is easy. Betrayal like that requires patience. I told myself I needed to be sure, not for her, but for me. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I started watching. I took mental notes of her errands, of the perfume she wore on church days, of the days she suddenly dressed better than usual. I even started writing things down, times, places, little inconsistencies. I learned the exact rhythm of her lies. Every night I'd sit in my chair pretending to read while she sent those texts she thought I didn't notice. I memorized the sound of her laughter when she thought she was alone. It was the same laugh she used to give me, soft, teasing, full of warmth. But now it belonged to another man. I learned that silence is the best weapon of a patient man. Patience became my armor. Every smile I gave her was a calculated move, every kind word a mask. I was no longer her husband. I was her audience, waiting for the final act. And the worst part? She didn't even see it. She didn't notice the shift in my eyes, the calmness in my tone. She mistook my silence for weakness, but she was wrong. Because silence, when wielded right, is louder than any scream. Like this video if you've ever been hurt by someone who swore they'd never lie to you, because my silence is only the beginning.
Caroline came by that Saturday afternoon, sunlight spilling through the magnolia branches as her laughter filled the kitchen. She had that same warmth she's always had, the kind that could soften any edge, any hurt. She was holding a pie she'd baked, cinnamon still warm in the air, and chattering about her life with Debian. "Dad," she said, leaning against the counter, "Mom and Debian get along so well. It makes me happy." Her words hit harder than I expected. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and nodded. "That's good, sweetheart. That's really good." But inside, something cracked. I felt a sting deep behind my chest, sharp and hollow, all at once. My daughter thought she'd married a good man. I thought so too, once. I watched her talk about their new home, about the plans they had, about how Mom said she'd help pick out new curtains. Joanne just smiled, playing her role perfectly. Her laughter blended with Caroline's, the same tone, the same easy comfort. Only now I could hear the difference. I could see it too. The tiny glances, the unnecessary touches. To Caroline, it probably looked like a mother showing affection to her son-in-law. To me, it was betrayal hiding behind familiarity. Later that night, after Caroline left, I sat alone in the living room and thought about the day she got married. It was a summer evening, Charleston glowing gold beneath the sunset. We'd strung fairy lights across the garden, and the sound of jazz carried softly through the air. Joanne looked beautiful that night. A green dress, her hair pinned the way she knew I liked. I remember dancing with her under those lights, the world spinning slow and sweet. I leaned close and whispered, "We did it, Joe. We raised a good one. You and me, forever." She'd smiled back and said, "Forever." Now I couldn't help but wonder if that was when it started, if that promise had already been broken long before I noticed. For the first time in my life, I couldn't find peace even in my own memories. They were tainted now. Every laugh, every smile, painted over with doubt. A few days later, I stopped by the diner downtown, the one where I used to meet my old friend, Mark Jensen. He'd been a police officer before retiring, sharp as ever, with eyes that could read a man faster than a lie detector. He looked at me as soon as I sat down and said, "You've got the look of a man who knows more than he wants to." I gave a dry chuckle. "That obvious, huh?" Mark sipped his coffee. "You've always been steady, Ray, but lately you've got that quiet storm look. Something's eating at you." I stared out the window for a moment before answering. "It's Joanne and Debian." He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just leaned back slowly and nodded. "Tell me." I told him about the phone call, the perfume, the silences that stretched too long. I didn't tell him everything,
Not yet, but enough to make the weight on my chest a little lighter. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. You sure you want to know the rest, Ray? 'Cause once you do, there's no going back.
I don't want it, I said quietly. Not yet. I just need to see if I still have the strength to face it. What's worse, losing your wife to another man or realizing that man sits across from your daughter every Thanksgiving? Mark leaned in. You want me to look into him? Not too deep, I said. Not yet. Just see if anything looks off. Money, time, phone calls, anything that doesn't fit. He nodded. I'll be discreet. When I left the diner, the air outside felt heavier. The streets were lined with old oaks, and the sound of cicadas followed me all the way home. For the first time in years, I didn't turn toward the house right away. I sat in my truck, watching the porch light flicker through the windshield. Inside that house was the woman I'd built my life around, and somewhere out there, my daughter's husband. Both of them were walking through my days like ghosts of the life I thought I had. That night, Joanne was already asleep when I got in, or pretending to be. I lay beside her, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. I could hear the soft tick of the clock, the rhythm of her breathing. And for the first time, I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not grief, but clarity. If truth was coming for me, I'd be ready. The dinner invitation is coming soon, and trust me, it's not what you think.
A week had passed since I had my quiet conversation with Mark. Each day stretched longer than the one before, filled with silence and careful observation. Joanne carried on her routines flawlessly, laughing when Caroline called, leaving early for errands, dressing in ways that suggested innocence. But I knew. I just needed proof. Mark came by late one afternoon. The sun was fading over Charleston, casting a golden light across the magnolia trees. He carried a worn leather folder, heavy with papers and photographs. The sight of it made my stomach knot. I already feared what I would find inside, but nothing prepares a man for confirmation of betrayal. He set the folder on my workbench with deliberate calm and slowly opened it. First, the photos, candid, stolen in the shadows of our own home. There they were, Joanne and Debian, laughing, leaning too close, hands brushing in ways that weren't innocent. My wife, my daughter's mother, was smiling at him the way she used to smile at me. Then came the financial records, transfers from Caroline's accounts, large sums of money, moving into accounts registered under Joanne's name. Hidden, secret, deliberate. Mark looked at me steadily. Your son-in-law isn't just sleeping with your wife, Ray. He's also bleeding your daughter dry. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I gripped the edge of the workbench so hard that my knuckles ached. My mind raced, trying to process the enormity of it all. It wasn't just lust. It was greed. My own wife, helping him steal from our daughter. I couldn't speak. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me, the way it had always comforted me during long nights in this house. But tonight, it felt oppressive. I went to the porch, needing air, needing space, needing a moment to breathe without seeing the images again.
Through the kitchen window, I caught sight of Joanne, laughing softly while texting. The same smile she used when she was mine. It twisted in my chest. That smile, once a balm for all my worries, now pierced me like a blade. It was joy. It was betrayal. It was everything I had loved and everything I had lost, all at once. If you caught your wife betraying both you and your child, how far would you go to make them pay? Let me know in the comments section. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Not yet. Rage was useless without a plan, without timing. Instead, I began preparing. Quietly, methodically. I cleaned the house.
set the dining table perfectly, dusted the silver and polished the glassware until it reflected the chandelier light like mirrors of truth. I thought about the dinner. Not just any dinner, the dinner. The one where the air would shift, where all secrets would come to light. I even discussed small details with Mark. His help was invaluable in planning something precise, something that would make the betrayal undeniable to everyone present. Revenge, I muttered to myself one night while arranging the dining chairs, is best served slow, with wine and good lighting. I envisioned it, the moment when Debian would realize the walls he'd hidden behind weren't solid, when Joanne would understand that the smile she wore for him wouldn't save her now. Then came the invitations. I wrote them carefully, warmly, politely, like nothing was wrong. Caroline would come, of course, oblivious, still believing in her mother's fidelity. Debian would too arrive thinking he had outsmarted everyone. And Joanne, always the center of attention, would walk in unsuspecting of the storm she had sown herself. The invitation sent, I sat back in my chair and looked out at the magnolia trees again. They were blooming, the petals soft in the late evening light. And I realized something. This wasn't about vengeance for me. It was about justice. The kind that leaves nothing hidden, the kind that restores the balance you thought had been lost. Hit that like button if you're still here, because the dinner invitation just went out, and what happens next will leave you breathless. I went inside and lit the fireplace, watching the flames flicker across the walls. Every detail was ready, every silent observation, every patient note I had taken over the weeks, every quiet breath I had held now had purpose. The night ahead promised clarity, and I intended to make sure that by the time it ended, nothing would remain concealed. This wasn't the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a reckoning.
The week leading up to dinner felt endless. Every day I moved through the house with quiet precision, turning every corner, inspecting every detail. The dining room had to be perfect, polished, orderly, and convincing. I dusted the chandelier until it sparkled in the evening light, and I scrubbed the floorboards until they gleamed like the reflection of truth itself. The silverware, inherited over decades, was polished until it could blind you. Every plate, glass, and napkin was arranged with meticulous care. With Mark's help, I set up a small projector in the corner, hidden but perfectly positioned to cast images across the wall. A discreet recorder rested on the buffet, capturing every sound that might become useful later. I felt a surge of satisfaction. If they wanted to play make-believe, I would give them a stage they'd never forget. Every detail was deliberate, every action calculated. This dinner would not be ordinary. Caroline arrived first, her warm smile lighting the room as she stepped through the front door. She hugged me tightly, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I returned her embrace with grace, hiding the pain coiled in my chest. Her laughter was genuine, effortless, a reminder of what was at stake, and why I could not allow deceit to continue unchecked. A few minutes later, Joanne and Debian walked in together. Their smiles were synchronized, rehearsed, almost too perfect. They greeted Caroline and me as if stepping into someone else's home, not as the people who had broken the very foundation of it. They looked like guests, not criminals. But that's the thing about betrayal. It dresses well. I welcomed them with calm precision, masking the storm inside me with smiles and polite words. I directed them toward the dining room, carefully guiding the conversation toward small talk, light jokes, and reminiscences from years past. Every anecdote, every laugh, was a thread I pulled deliberately, leading them closer to the moment I had planned. Would you confront them in private, or let the truth unfold in front of everyone? Comment what you'd do.
The dinner began. Plates were served, wine poured, and the clinking of cutlery filled the room. Caroline chatted about work, about friends, about the latest family happenings, her eyes bright, trusting. Joanne offered polite comments, laughter tucked neatly at the edges of her sentences. Debian leaned back, comfortable, unaware that the walls of the house were no longer his allies. I steered every word, every glance, and every movement. I smiled when appropriate, nodded along, and laughed softly at their jokes. All the while, I kept my mind on the plan. Every image, every record, every detail had a purpose. The stage was set, the players unaware, and I held the script in my hands. Caroline raised her glass suddenly. "To family and forgiveness," she said, her voice bright, full of hope. I swallowed hard, tasting the bitter truth behind her words. Forgiveness was on the table, all right, just not for the reasons they thought. I let the toast linger, savoring the moment, letting it hang in the air like an invisible countdown. Every eye in the room turned toward me, waiting for the response. I raised my glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement, masking the tension coiled tightly in my chest. Behind the polite exterior, my heart beat steadily, every pulse reminding me that the culmination of weeks of planning, of patient observation, was moments away. The dinner was not just a meal, it was a battlefield, and every smile, every gesture was a maneuver toward the ultimate confrontation. I could see it in their movements, their glances at each other. They sensed nothing. They thought this was a simple family dinner, an evening of light-hearted conversation. They had no idea that the house, every polished surface and carefully arranged chair, had been designed for truth to reveal itself unflinchingly in plain sight. Subscribe before the next chapter drops, because when I stand up from that chair, nothing in that house will ever be the same again. Every moment stretched, thick with anticipation. The wine, the laughter, the small talk, all ordinary on the surface, but underneath a current of quiet tension pulled at every corner of the room. Soon, very soon, every lie would unravel in the most deliberate way imaginable. I sat back slightly, a calm mask over the storm inside me, watching them. Every detail, every movement, every breath had brought us to this night, the night when truth would no longer hide behind polite smiles.
The dining room was immaculate. Candlelight flickered across polished silverware, casting long, deliberate shadows. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air, but it didn't mask the tension building quietly beneath the surface. Everyone was seated, Caroline chatting nervously, her hands folded around her wineglass. Joanne smiled, carefully measured, and Debian leaned back in his chair, confident and casual, as if this evening were just another ordinary family dinner. I rose slowly, the weight of 38 years of life pressing down on my shoulders. My hand trembled slightly as I tapped the glass. The room hushed immediately, a subtle awareness passing through them that tonight was different. To 38 years of love, family, and truth, I said, my voice calm but firm. I let the words linger, watching as their eyes moved toward me, expecting warmth, expecting routine. But what I held in my hand wasn't routine. I looked to Joanne first, then at Debian. They both smiled politely, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. Truth, I continued, my tone measured, the one thing we all pretend to love, until it walks into the room. I pressed a small button on the remote beside me, and the projector flickered to life. The first images appeared on the wall, bank statements showing transfers from Caroline's accounts to a hidden account under Joanne's name. Then emails,
detailing conversations between Debian and Joanne about how to move funds undetected. And finally, the photograph I had been dreading. Joanne and Debian together, caught in the act, smiling as if the camera didn't exist. The room froze instantly. The hum of the chandelier seemed deafened by the weight of revelation. Caroline's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. Her gasping breath echoed in the sudden silence, and my stomach sank a little at the sight. That's when peace finally broke in my house.
Joanne rose, her voice trembling. "Raymond, please." I cut her off, my tone sharper than a whisper but still steady. "Don't talk about peace now. You traded it for greed." Caroline ran from the room, tears streaming down her face, barely able to comprehend the images before her. Debian opened his mouth to speak, to explain, to protest, but I took a deliberate step closer, closing the distance between us. My gaze held him in place, calm but unyielding. "You stole my daughter's money and my wife's soul," I said evenly. "Tell me, was it worth it?" The words hung in the air like iron. Debian faltered, his eyes darting between Joanne and me. The smirk he wore earlier was gone. For the first time, he realized that the walls he had thought would protect him were hollow, and the truth was standing there, unflinching. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. Control was my weapon tonight, far more powerful than any shouting match. Every detail had been arranged, every movement planned, and now the reality of what they had done, exposed in full light, was enough to crush them. "Dinner's not over yet," I said, sliding back into my chair with the image of calm authority. "We still have guests coming." I watched as Joanne's hands trembled over the table, as Debian's confidence dissolved into unease. Caroline ran from the room, her tears streaming down her face, barely able to comprehend the images before her. And in that moment, I realized that the betrayal they believed could be hidden from everyone was now visible to the only person who mattered: me. Every flicker of candlelight reflected off the projector's images, casting them again and again on the walls, over their faces. Every lie, every secret, every stolen cent, and every broken promise now laid bare for the family that had once trusted them completely. The room was cold, colder than any winter night in Charleston. And for the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small, quiet satisfaction, a sense that justice, however delayed, was finally arriving.
The room still reeked of tension and broken glass from the shattered wine glass moments before. The projector's glow lingered on the walls, a silent witness to the truths laid bare. I barely had time to breathe before headlights swept across the lawn. The sudden brightness made everyone squint. I had expected no one, yet here they were. Mark, calm and composed, flanked by two officers in crisp uniforms. Debian's confident smirk disappeared instantly, his face drained as Mark handed the officers the stack of documents I had gathered over weeks. Bank statements, transaction records, emails, every shred of proof that tied him and Joanne to theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The room seemed to shrink around him. I could see the panic rise, just as my old friend had predicted it would. Joanne's silence, which had masked so much in the past, gave way to panic. Her hands shook and her voice trembled as the officers read aloud the charges against Debian. Clear, undeniable, and damning. Fraud, theft, embezzlement. Each word was like a hammer driving into the foundation of the life she thought she had built. Caroline returned to the dining room, drawn by the sound of voices and the clatter outside. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of her husband being led to the door in handcuffs. She froze for a moment, disbelief etched across her face, before turning to me, seeking guidance, seeking understanding. I took a deep breath and spoke quietly, to myself, though she could hear. My revenge wasn't loud. It was lawful. Joanne, realizing that control had completely slipped from her grasp, broke down. She reached out, attempting to bridge the gap between herself and Caroline. Her hands shook, pleading, but my daughter recoiled. She had learned, finally, the full depth of deception. "Stay away from me, Mom," Caroline said firmly. The words stung, yet they were the truest words that could have been spoken in that room.
I watched the officers lead Debian out, the sound of the front door echoing like a bell, signaling finality. Joanne's cries followed faintly, a haunting, sorrowful chorus to the scene that had unfolded. I stepped forward calmly and escorted her to the door, my voice steady. "You once told me peace was the greatest blessing," I said softly. "I found it again, just not with you." She could not respond. She only stared, the enormity of her actions reflected in the tears streaming down her face. I closed the door behind her gently, leaving the past where it belonged, and returned inside to the quiet of the house that had been mine long before betrayal seeped through its walls. Weeks passed. The house, once heavy with tension and lies, slowly began to feel like home again. Carolyn came back frequently, and we spent time together in the kitchen, cooking meals, laughing softly, and talking late into the night. The sound of her voice, her genuine laughter, filled spaces that had been empty for too long. Healing, it seemed, was a process measured in small, quiet moments. I often walked the porch at dawn, coffee in hand, and felt the air in a way I hadn't in years. It was crisp, clean, and undisturbed. Revenge had been served, yes, but it didn't taste sweet. It tasted like quiet mornings and the clarity of justice done. The house I had built with my own hands finally felt like a sanctuary again, a place where truth could live openly, and where peace was earned rather than taken for granted. Evenings spent with my daughter were simple, comforting, and full of unspoken understanding. We didn't need grand gestures to feel the bond between us. Every shared smile, every laugh, every story became a brick in the reconstruction of trust. My life, once fractured, was slowly finding its rhythm again. I never forgot the lessons of that night, that betrayal can come from those closest to you, that love can be a double-edged sword, and that patience, planning, and truth are more powerful than anger or haste.